Sometimes history's greatest secrets aren't hidden in vaults or buried in distant ruins. They're right beneath our feet, waiting for a single misstep to reveal them. Picture this: a crumbling staircase in an old European estate, giving way under the weight of time, and in that moment of collapse, exposing a trove of documents that had been sealed away for generations. What started as a simple repair job became a gateway to the past, unearthing a web of political intrigue so vast it rewrote what we thought we knew about power, betrayal, and the shadowy deals that shaped nations. This isn't just a story about bricks and mortar. It's a reminder that history is fragile, and sometimes all it takes is one crack to let the truth spill out. The discovery itself was almost accidental. Workers clearing the debris of the fallen staircase found a hidden compartment behind the wreckage, stuffed with letters, ledgers, and maps, all meticulously preserved, yet seemingly meant to be forgotten. As historians pieced together the fragments, they realized these weren't just ordinary records. They were the smoking guns of a centuries-old conspiracy, implicating some of the most influential families of the era. Names that once commanded respect now stood accused of secret alliances, backroom deals, and even treason. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a family secret. It was a political time bomb, buried so thoroughly that its existence had faded into myth until now. What makes this story so gripping isn't just the scale of the deception, but how close it came to being lost forever. Think about it: if that staircase hadn't collapsed, if those workers hadn't noticed the odd gap in the wall, these revelations might have stayed hidden for another 100 years. It's a humbling reminder that history isn't always written in grand gestures. Sometimes it's whispered in the cracks and crevices of everyday life. Over the course of this video, we'll follow the trail of clues left behind, from cryptic handwritten notes to long-forgotten financial records, and uncover how a single architectural flaw became the key to unlocking a saga of power, ambition, and the lengths people will go to keep their secrets safe. The past is never as quiet as it seems, and what you're about to hear will prove it. The quiet town of Bruges had stood unchanged for centuries, its cobblestone streets and gabled houses preserving the atmosphere of a bygone era. So when renovations began on a stately 17th century mansion near the city center, no one expected anything more than routine repairs, but history had other plans. As workers cleared the rubble of the collapsed staircase, their shovels struck something unusual: not just broken wood and plaster, but a hollow space beneath the floorboards. What they found inside wasn't debris, but a carefully concealed compartment, its contents untouched by time. The homeowner, a local historian with a keen eye for detail, knew this was no ordinary cache. The moment he unfolded the first brittle letter, its ink still dark against the yellowed paper, he sensed the weight of what they'd uncovered. Here were personal correspondences, financial ledgers, and annotated maps, all dating back to the height of Bruges' mercantile power. At first glance, they seemed like mundane records of trade and household affairs, but threaded between the lines were names of influential merchant families, cryptic references to private meetings, and annotations that hinted at deals struck far from public view. What made these documents extraordinary wasn't just their age, but their timing. They belonged to a period when Bruges was slipping from its position as a commercial powerhouse, its wealth and influence quietly shifting to rival cities. Official histories had long painted this decline as inevitable, the natural ebb and flow of trade routes, but these papers told a different story. They revealed clandestine agreements, back-channel negotiations, and even whispers of sabotage, suggesting that Bruges' fall wasn't just bad luck, but the result of careful orchestration. The historian's hands must have trembled as he pieced together the implications. These weren't just forgotten papers. They were the missing pieces of a puzzle that had frustrated scholars for generations. How many other secrets had been tucked away behind walls or buried beneath floorboards, waiting for the right moment to come to light? And what did it mean that this evidence had been hidden so deliberately? Someone, centuries ago, had gone to great lengths to ensure these records stayed out of sight. Now, thanks to a rotted staircase and a stroke of luck, their secret was finally out. The Vander Meulen family had always been portrayed in Bruges' official records as shrewd but respectable traders, pillars of the community who built their fortune on wool, spices, and banking. Yet the newly uncovered documents painted a far more complex picture. Between the lines of mundane trade ledgers were annotations in a cipher-like shorthand, and tucked between pages of shipping manifests were letters sealed with unfamiliar crests. One stood out immediately: the unmistakable fleur-de-lis insignia of Cardinal Richelieu, the power behind the French throne. Why would a Flemish merchant family correspond in secret with one of Europe's most formidable political operators? The answer lay in the dates. These letters coincided with a turbulent period when the Dutch revolt against Spanish rule was reaching its peak, and Bruges, officially loyal to the Spanish crown, found itself caught in the middle. The Vander Meulens, it seemed, had been playing both sides. Their ships carried not just goods but intelligence. Their warehouses stored more than spices, they housed clandestine meetings. And their wealth, it wasn't just earned through trade, it was amassed through influence, favors, and carefully brokered secrets. The most damning evidence came in the form of a ledger marked with a single symbol, a tiny, stylized compass. At first glance, it appeared to track routine transactions, but cross-referencing the dates and amounts with known historical events revealed a startling pattern. Payments spiked just before key political shifts. Spanish troop movements stalled, rival merchants suddenly withdrew from deals, and French-backed privateers mysteriously avoided targeting Vander Meulen ships. The compass wasn't just a merchant's mark. It was a code signaling the family's role as puppeteers in a geopolitical dance. Yet for all their power, the Vander Meulens left no boastful declarations, no proud memoirs. Their secrets were buried so thoroughly that even their descendants seemed unaware. That deliberate silence raises the most chilling question of all. If these documents were never meant to be found, what other truths might still lie hidden beneath the worn floorboards of history? Deciphering these ancient texts required more than just linguistic skill. It demanded patience, historical context, and a willingness to read between the lines. The paleographers worked painstakingly, their magnifying glasses hovering over ink strokes faded by centuries. Some letters were written in a mix of Flemish and French, while others employed coded phrases meant to obscure their true meaning. One recurring term stood out: the silent accord. At first glance, it could have been mistaken for a simple business arrangement, but when cross-referenced with other documents, it became clear this was no ordinary contract. The so-called accord bound multiple noble families to a shared vow of secrecy, with severe consequences for anyone who broke rank. The most revealing letter was dated to the winter of 1631, right in the middle of Europe's brutal 30 Years' War. Its author, a Vander Meulen patriarch, wrote cryptically about a gathering in Antwerp, where representatives from Bruges, Amsterdam, and Paris had convened under the guise of a trade summit. The real agenda, however, was far more consequential. They weren't discussing wool or spices, they were negotiating the future of the Low Countries, carving up spheres of influence while their respective nations clashed on the battlefield. What made this meeting explosive wasn't just its clandestine nature, but the attendance of a figure known only as the Cardinal's envoy. given the timing and the cryptic references to French interests, historians now believe this was a direct link to Richelieu's network, proof that Bruges' merchant elite were maneuvering behind the scenes to secure their survival no matter the cost. But the smoking gun came in the form of a single parchment, its wax seal still partially intact. This wasn't a veiled allusion or a coded message. It was a stark, unambiguous declaration. Signed by 3 generations of Vander Meulen leaders, it pledged the family's unwavering loyalty to a foreign crown in exchange for protection and commercial privileges. The phrasing left no room for interpretation. This was treason, punishable by death if discovered. Yet somehow it never was. The fact that this document survived hidden but unburned suggests it was kept as insurance, a bargaining chip in case the family's double game ever unraveled. What's chilling isn't just the scale of the deception, but how effectively it was buried. These letters weren't discarded. They were preserved with deliberate care, tucked away like a loaded weapon. That level of calculation forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about power in early modern Europe. The official histories celebrate kings and generals, but these crumbling pages tell a different story, one where the real architects of change were the merchants whispering in shadowed rooms, their ink-stained fingers quietly pulling the strings of empires. The deeper historians examined those weathered ledgers, the more apparent it became the Vander Meulens hadn't just traded goods, they'd traded in secrets. Their ships sailed with 2 cargoes, one of silk and spices for the markets and another of coded messages, hidden in false bottomed crates or stitched into the lining of merchant coats. A particularly revealing manifest from 1628 listed a shipment of Venetian glassware bound for Amsterdam. On the surface, it seemed ordinary. But when compared with diplomatic records, the timing was impossible to ignore. That same week, a Spanish envoy had urgently recalled his staff from The Hague amid whispers of a leaked treaty. Coincidence unlikely, the glassware's route passed straight through the heart of that political storm. Then there were the payments, page after page of meticulous entries, each line item a breadcrumb leading to a darker truth. Among the standard fees for port duties and crew wages were curious disbursements labeled only as for discretion. The amounts varied, sometimes modest sums to low-ranking clerks, other times staggering payments to magistrates and tax collectors. One recipient's name appeared with eerie frequency, a certain harbor master in Rotterdam, whose sudden acquisition of a country estate had long puzzled local historians. Now the reason was clear. He hadn't inherited wealth, he'd been bought. What's truly astonishing isn't just the scale of their operation, but how seamlessly it blended into everyday commerce. A merchant's ledger could double as an intelligence dossier. A routine stop to unload pepper in Antwerp might mask a whispered exchange with a French agent. Even their bookkeeping held layers of meaning, columns of numbers that, when decoded, revealed everything from troop movements to the going rate for a bureaucrat's silence. This wasn't espionage as we imagine it today, with shadowy figures in dark alleys. It was espionage by ledger and ledger, conducted in broad daylight under the respectable cloak of trade. And that raises an unsettling question. If the Vander Meulens could operate so effectively behind this facade, how many other so-called merchant dynasties were doing the same? The Hanseatic League, the Medici banks, the East India companies, these were all networks with the reach, the resources, and the motive to play similar games. Historians have long suspected that commerce and politics were intertwined in this era, but the Bruges discovery suggests something far more deliberate, that for some families, the marketplace wasn't just a stage for business. It was the perfect cover for a much darker craft, the art of pulling strings without ever leaving a trace. Buried beneath routine trade agreements and shipping manifests one document stood out like a bloodstain on parchment, a draft letter, its edges frayed with age, detailing a plot so audacious it could have rewritten European history. The handwriting was unmistakably a Vander Meulens, but the words belonged to a conspirator. It laid out a plan to ambush a Habsburg archduke during his procession through Antwerp, a move that would have plunged the region into chaos. The letter never reached its intended recipient. Instead, it was hidden away along with the family's other secrets after a co-conspirator lost their nerve and betrayed the group to Spanish authorities. What made this discovery so explosive wasn't just the failed plot itself, but the names scrawled in the margins. A bishop, ostensibly a man of God, had allegedly provided sanctuary for the would-be assassins. A military officer, sworn to protect the crown, had arranged for guards to look the other way at the critical moment. These weren't shadowy mercenaries or faceless radicals, they were pillars of society, their reputations spotless in the official records. Until now, historians had dismissed the rumored assassination attempt as tavern gossip or enemy propaganda. But here, in ink that hadn't seen daylight for 4 centuries, was proof that the conspiracy went all the way to the top. The draft letter's existence raises a chilling question. Why keep it? Destroying evidence of treason would have been the logical choice. Yet someone, perhaps a Vander Meulen patriarch, chose to preserve it, folding it carefully among less incriminating documents. The most plausible explanation is as pragmatic as it is ruthless: blackmail. In a world where alliances shifted like sand, holding proof of a rival's betrayal could be more valuable than gold. The letter wasn't just a record of a failed plot. It was insurance, a blade kept sharp in case someone needed reminding of the skeletons in their closet. For modern historians, this changes everything. The Habsburg Archduke's near miss had long been a footnote, a curious might have been, but these documents reveal it as a turning point that never turned. Had the plot succeeded, the resulting power vacuum could have drawn France deeper into the conflict, reshaped Dutch independence, and altered the balance of power in Europe for generations. Instead, the conspiracy collapsed, its architects fading into obscurity until a rotted staircase gave up their secrets. The past never really forgets. It just waits silently for someone to stumble upon the truth. The map was drawn with the precision of someone who knew Antwerp's streets like the lines on their own palm. Not just the cobbled avenues and canals visible to all, but the hidden veins running beneath them. When conservators carefully unfolded it, the brittle paper revealed a network of tunnels snaking under the city's grandest buildings, each intersection marked with a small red X. At first glance, it could have been mistaken for a merchant's private shortcut system, a way to move goods unseen, but the truth was far more dangerous. These weren't trade routes, they were escape corridors designed to spirit fugitives from the cathedral's shadow to the docks under cover of darkness. Archaeologists followed the map's clues to a long-forgotten chamber beneath the cathedral's north transept, its entrance bricked over so seamlessly that no one had thought to question the uneven wall. Behind it, they found rusted swords, a cache of pistols wrapped in oilcloth, and stacks of letters sealed with wax but never sent. The weapons alone would have been startling proof that someone had prepared for violence. But the real revelation was in the letters. Written in the same cipher as the Vander Meulen ledgers, they detailed payments to stonemasons, bribes to city guards, and most damningly, a list of names labeled simply as the Silenced. These weren't just allies, they were men who'd been paid to disappear, their loyalty bought or their objections permanently erased. The tunnels themselves were engineering marvels, wide enough for 2 men to walk abreast, with niches carved into the walls to hold torches or, as one archaeologist grimly noted, to store weapons within easy reach. Sections branched off toward key locations: the town hall, the Spanish garrison, the homes of prominent officials. It was a skeleton key to the city, built not for commerce but for conquest. And the Vander Meulens hadn't just known about it, they'd funded its construction. Their ledgers contained entries for masonry services and cellar repairs, bland terms masking the creation of a subterranean rebellion. What chills the bones isn't the audacity of the plan, but how close it came to succeeding. The weapons were positioned for rapid distribution. The tunnels were operational. Only the sudden arrest of a co-conspirator, a minor noble who drunkenly bragged in the wrong tavern, forced the plotters to abandon their preparations and seal the evidence away. Had that one man held his tongue, Antwerp might have woken to a very different dawn, its streets controlled not by Spanish soldiers, but by men emerging from the darkness below. History often turns on such slender threads, and sometimes, centuries later, those threads resurface in the unlikeliest of places, like a map tucked behind a crumbling staircase, waiting for its story to be told. The cipher was elegant in its complexity, a mix of numerical substitutions and symbolic flourishes that had once baffled codebreakers across Europe. But when Dr. Isabelle Laurent, a historian specializing in 17th century cryptography, spotted the faint watermark of a fleur-de-lis beside the Vander Meulen letters, she knew she was holding something extraordinary. That watermark was Richelieu's signature, a silent boast from a man who thrived on secrecy, and the cipher itself, a near-perfect match to the cardinal's personal system, last seen in the archives of the Louvre. Decoding the letter was like peeling back layers of a centuries-old onion. At first glance, it read like a mundane merchant's report talk of grain prices and shipping delays. But once the cipher was cracked, the true message slithered into view. Richelieu wasn't just corresponding with the Vander Meulens, he was directing them. Specific instructions detailed how to manipulate local markets, buy up wheat stores to create artificial shortages, flood the region with debased currency to undermine trust in Spanish rule, and most chillingly, identify key infrastructure to remove from service, a euphemism that left little to the imagination. The letter's postscript contained a single line that changed everything. Ensure the Antwerp incident proceeds as discussed. Cross-referencing the date with historical records revealed a chilling coincidence. That same week, a fire had ravaged Antwerp's grain silos, plunging the city into panic and riots. Officially, it had been blamed on a careless lantern. Now the truth was clear. It was no accident. The Vander Meulens hadn't just profited from chaos. They'd engineered it, turning their commercial networks into weapons of economic warfare. What's staggering isn't just the brutality of the plan, but its precision. These weren't the impulsive acts of desperate rebels. They were calculated strikes designed to erode Spanish control piece by piece. A forged ledger here, a sabotaged shipment there, each action small enough to evade suspicion, but collectively devastating. The Vander Meulens understood something modern strategists still grapple with, that money and markets can topple empires just as surely as armies. And they wielded that knowledge with the cold efficiency of a surgeon's scalpel. Yet the most haunting question isn't how they did it, but why they kept the evidence. Risking treason was one thing, preserving proof of it was another. Perhaps the answer lies in the cipher's final page, a list of names, each followed by a sum. These weren't payments for services rendered. They were blackmail ledgers, proof that the Vander Meulens hadn't just served Richelieu's interests. They'd ensured their own survival by holding the secrets of Europe's most powerful men hostage, one carefully documented betrayal at a time. The ledger's spine cracked like a dry twig when the conservator opened it, revealing pages so densely packed with notes they resembled a spider's web of ink. At first glance, the entries seemed innocuous: dates, names, sums of money. But the truth lay in the margins, where tiny symbols and coded phrases transformed this from a simple account book into something far darker. One entry listed a payment of 200 guilders to a magistrate, followed by the word "hunting accident" in cramped script. Cross-referencing local archives revealed the tragic death of a young nobleman that same month, officially ruled as a stray arrow during a boar hunt. The magistrate had signed off on the investigation without question. What made this ledger unique wasn't just its contents, but its organization. Each family had their own section, their secrets catalogued with the same care a merchant might inventory bolts of silk. The Vander Mullins didn't merely record these scandals, they graded them. A small dagger symbol next to a name indicated blackmail in progress, while a crossed-out crown meant the leverage had been spent. One particularly damning page detailed how they'd fabricated evidence of theft against the De Witt heir, planting stolen silver in his saddlebags during a feast. The payoff, not coin but deeds to waterfront properties that would triple the family's docking revenues. The most chilling revelation came midway through the book, a single page titled only "The Antwerp Solution." Here, the usual discreet language gave way to startling clarity. It described how the family had orchestrated the downfall of a competing trading house by exploiting the owner's greatest weakness, his devoutly Catholic wife. They'd bribed a priest to falsely accuse her of heresy during confession, knowing the scandal would force the family to flee. The ledger noted the outcome with cold satisfaction: acquired full inventory at 1/10 value. Yet for all its meticulous cruelty, the ledger's true genius lay in its omissions. Nowhere did it explicitly state threats or coercion. The Vander Mullins understood that the power of a secret isn't in its use, but in its existence. Simply knowing they possessed this knowledge would have been enough to bend lesser men to their will. That's why the book survived when so much else was burned. It wasn't just a record. It was a loaded pistol left visible on the desk of history, waiting for someone to finally open its chamber and see how many lives it had truly cost. The Vander Mullins didn't fade quietly into history. They collapsed from within, undone by the very culture of secrecy that had once been their greatest strength. By the early 1700s, their ledgers showed a sudden, jarring shift. Payments to officials dried up, shipments grew sporadic, and then, in the span of a single year, the family's name vanished from all major trade agreements. The documents found behind that staircase reveal why. Their downfall wasn't orchestrated by rival merchants or vengeful monarchs. It came from the one place they'd never fortified against betrayal: their own bloodline. A series of hastily written notes, their ink smudged as if penned in anger, tell the story of Pieter Vander Meulen, the youngest son. Disinherited in favor of his older brother, Pieter had been relegated to managing minor accounts in Rotterdam, far from the family's center of power. But Rotterdam was also where Spanish auditors had begun scrutinizing shipping records with unusual intensity. One letter, unsigned but unmistakably Pieter's hand, contained a chillingly simple demand: recognize my claim, or I will ensure the world recognizes yours. He wasn't just threatening to expose their financial dealings. He knew where the bodies were buried, literally. The tunnels beneath Antwerp, the bribed magistrates, the silenced collaborators. Pieter had grown up in the shadows of this empire, and he understood exactly how to dismantle it. The family's response was swift and brutal. Pieter's name disappears from all records after 1706, with a single ledger entry noting a final settlement paid to an unnamed recipient. But the damage was done. Within months, Spanish officials began quietly freezing Vander Meulen assets. No arrests were made, no public accusations leveled, just a series of bureaucratic maneuvers that strangled their operations. It was punishment without spectacle, designed to avoid drawing attention to the very corruption that had enabled their rise. The family's once grand mansion was stripped of its valuables, its halls emptying as creditors circled like vultures. Yet the most telling detail isn't in the official records, it's in the hidden compartment itself. Among the documents was a sealed envelope addressed to Pieter, its wax unbroken. Inside, a single sheet of parchment bore just 5 words: "You were always the weakest." Whether it was a final jab from his father or a warning from his brother, the message was clear. The Vander Meulens had built their fortune on loyalty enforced by fear, and in the end, that fear wasn't enough. The staircase didn't just collapse under the weight of time, it fell because the house it supported had already been hollowed out from within. Modern forensic techniques peeled back the layers of time with astonishing precision, turning centuries-old clues into irrefutable evidence. The paper itself told the first part of the story. Its fibers matched a specific mill near Bruges that had operated for only a few decades in the early 17th century. But it was the ink that revealed the real intrigue. Chemists detected traces of a rare iron gall formula, one favored by French diplomats for its resistance to tampering. This wasn't just any correspondence. These were messages meant to last, written with the deliberate care of men who knew their words might one day be scrutinized. Then came the envelopes, their wax seals cracked but still clinging to fragments of DNA. Geneticists compared the traces to living descendants, tracing family lines that had branched across Europe. One match led to a quiet Brussels neighborhood, where a high school history teacher named Marie Vander Meulen had grown up hearing vague stories of merchants and maybe a minor noble or two. Holding the lab report that confirmed her direct lineage to the conspirators, she burst into disbelieving laughter. All those years teaching about kings and treaties, and it turns out my own ancestors were the ones pulling the strings. Her DNA wasn't just a biological link. It was a thread connecting her to a past far more tangled than she'd ever imagined. But the most startling revelation came from something seemingly mundane: the dust. Microscopic analysis of the compartment's debris revealed pollen from olive trees, a species that hadn't grown anywhere near Bruges in that era, the only plausible explanation. The documents had been hidden elsewhere, first likely in southern France or Italy, before being moved to their final resting place behind the staircase. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep these secrets not just concealed, but mobile, ready to be spirited away at a moment's notice. The schoolteacher's reaction captures the heart of this discovery. History isn't just about grand battles or crowned heads. It's woven through the lives of ordinary people who inherit legacies they never chose, like a woman grading papers in Brussels, unaware that her bloodline once swayed empires. The past doesn't belong to textbooks. It lives in the ink on our fingers, the dust in our attics, and the quiet, relentless truth that no secret stays buried forever. The debate among historians wasn't just academic. It was a collision of ethics, politics, and the raw power of uncomfortable truths. On one side stood Dr. Elias Vandenberg, a Bruges native whose career had been built on unraveling the city's mercantile past. He argued passionately that the Vander Meulen documents belonged in the public eye, no matter the consequences. History isn't a curated museum exhibit, he insisted. It's messy, it's ugly, and sometimes it implicates people we'd rather not confront. But across the seminar table, Dr. Simone Laurent, a specialist in diplomatic history, pushed back with equal fervor. Her finger tapped a faded family tree as she spoke. This isn't just about rewriting paragraphs in a textbook. That De Witt listed here, their descendants chair 2 of Belgium's largest banks. The Van Eyck mentioned in the Blackmail ledger. they still own half the property in this city's historic district. Publishing this isn't scholarship, it's throwing a lit match into a room full of gunpowder. The tension escalated when a junior researcher pointed out something everyone had overlooked. The document's survival wasn't an accident. The compartment behind the staircase had been too deliberate, too carefully constructed. These weren't hastily hidden secrets, they were a time capsule meant to be found. But by whom and why now? The answer might lie in a single phrase scrawled on the compartment's inner wall. When the lion sleeps. Local archivists recognized it instantly as part of an old Bruges proverb. When the lion sleeps, the mice write history. It was a taunt, a challenge flung across centuries by someone who knew their legacy would outlast them. The university's legal team added another layer of complexity. Belgium's strict privacy laws, designed to protect living individuals, clashed with the public's right to historical truth. Could a 17th century conspiracy lawsuit? Stranger things had happened. In 2014, a descendant of a Napoleonic general successfully sued to suppress letters revealing his ancestors' embezzlement, arguing it damaged the family's reputation. The Vander Meulens papers were far more explosive. In the end, the historians reached a compromise as fragile as the parchment they studied. They would publish, but with redactions, replacing certain surnames with codes only accessible to accredited researchers. It was history half told, a nod to the fact that the past never truly dies. The staircase had collapsed, but the walls it revealed were still standing. And behind them, the whispers of ambition and betrayal echoed louder than ever. The mansion's walls held more than dust and echoes, they concealed a blueprint of paranoia. When conservationists ran ground-penetrating radar through the structure, the scans revealed a honeycomb of voids behind the plaster, some no larger than a loaf of bread, others stretching the length of corridors. These weren't structural flaws or forgotten storage spaces. They were deliberate, engineered to serve a singular purpose, to collapse under pressure. The staircase itself, once thought to be a victim of time, turned out to be the linchpin of an elaborate security system. Its mortar had been mixed with a brittle aggregate designed to crumble at the slightest disturbance, while the supporting beams were notched in a way that would cause the entire structure to fold inward if tampered with. This wasn't shoddy craftsmanship, it was a trap, centuries in the making. But traps aren't built without reason. The mansion's original blueprints, recovered from a municipal archive, bore annotations in a cramped hand, defensive measures per instructions. The architect had clearly been working under orders, though whose name appeared nowhere in the records. Yet the sheer sophistication of these hidden fail-safes pointed to someone with intimate knowledge of both engineering and espionage. One compartment, accessed by removing a specific floorboard near the hearth, contained a rusted iron lever. When conservators tentatively pulled it, an entire section of wainscoting slid back to reveal a vertical shaft just wide enough for a person to descend. A last resort escape route that terminated in a tunnel leading to the canal district. The most chilling discovery came from the mansion's foundation stones. Carved into their undersides were symbols matching those found in the Vander Meulens ledger, dagger marks, compasses, and a recurring motif of a key with a broken tooth. These weren't masons' marks or decorative flourishes. They were warnings left by the builders themselves. Whoever commissioned this house hadn't just wanted to hide their secrets. They'd wanted to ensure that anyone reckless enough to go looking for them wouldn't live to tell the tale. Yet for all their cunning, the architects of this labyrinth made one critical miscalculation. They never accounted for time. The slow creep of dampness weakened mortar meant to fail on command. The shifting of centuries-old joists triggered collapses meant to deter intruders. And in the end, it wasn't a rival or a spy who breached their defenses. It was the quiet, relentless work of decay. proving that even the most carefully laid plans crumble when faced with the one enemy no one can outwit. The letters bore the unmistakable seal of the Duke of Alba's personal secretary, a detail that sent historians scrambling. Here, buried beneath layers of shipping manifests, was proof that the Vander Meulens hadn't just dabbled in espionage, they'd mastered the art of political tightrope walking. The correspondence detailed a series of clandestine meetings in Antwerp's less reputable taverns, where the family's middle son, Jacob, had pledged the Vander Meulen fleet to transport Spanish troops under the guise of wool shipments. The Duke's promise in return, a monopoly on all Flemish grain trade once the Netherlands were pacified. Yet in the same hidden compartment, wrapped in a French silk handkerchief, lay another set of letters. These bore the cipher of Richelieu's most trusted spymaster, thanking the family for their timely intelligence regarding Spanish troop movements. The dates overlapped almost perfectly. While Jacob was swearing fealty to Spain in shadowed backrooms, his sister Margareta was in Paris, negotiating with the French for exclusive trading rights. It was a breathtaking gamble, playing two superpowers against each other while lining their own pockets. Their system was ruthlessly efficient. Spanish gold financed French bribes. French intelligence guided Spanish shipments into Dutch privateer ambushes, and through it all, the Vander Meulen ledgers showed profits soaring to unprecedented heights. But ambition has a way of outpacing caution. In 1639, a disgruntled French courier, shortchanged on his payment, leaked details of the arrangement to a Spanish garrison commander. The Duke's response was swift and brutal. Within weeks, 3 Vander Meulen ships mysteriously sank in calm seas, their crews vanishing without trace. What's fascinating isn't just the scale of their deception, but how it unraveled. The family had accounted for betrayal, for war, even for shifting alliances. What they hadn't factored was human greed, their own. In their haste to exploit both sides, they'd forgotten the first rule of the game. Every double agent is just one missed payment away from becoming someone else's informant. The courier's betrayal wasn't ideological, it was personal, and in the shadowy world of espionage, those are the cracks that bring empires crashing down. The final irony: the Spanish never reclaimed the Netherlands. The French never secured their trade routes, but the Vander Meulen name became synonymous with treachery so legendary. It took 4 centuries and a collapsing staircase to rewrite the record. Some secrets aren't meant to stay buried, they're meant to remind us that history's sharpest blades are often forged in the fires of overreach. The Reliquary first appears in the family records with all the subtlety of a shout in a cathedral. An entry from 1642 listing 1 casket of gilded silver, set with sapphires and pearls, containing the finger bone of Saint Hubertus. The description alone would make any art historian's pulse quicken, but it's the notation beneath that cracks the case wide open, given by Cardinal's own hand, in gratitude for services beyond reckoning. That Cardinal, almost certainly Richelieu himself, for a man who dealt in power rather than piety, gifting a sacred relic wasn't just payment, it was a message, a way to bind the Vander Meulens to him through something far heavier than gold. Tracking the Reliquary's journey reads like a thriller penned by history itself. Church archives show it vanished from French inventories shortly after Richelieu's death, likely smuggled out by loyalists before his enemies could reclaim church treasures. By 1651, it resurfaces in a Bruges notary's record as collateral for a loan, the first hint that the family viewed this holy object as just another asset to leverage. Then, in 1723, the trail goes abruptly cold. A fire at their Antwerp warehouse supposedly destroyed it, along with a fortune in spices and silks. But the insurance claim lists no sapphires, no pearls, no mention of the relic at all. Either someone removed it before the flames took hold, or the fire was never about spices to begin with. Modern treasure hunters follow two tantalizing leads. The first comes from a 1924 auction catalogue in Lisbon, where a 16th century silver devotional box matches the reliquary's dimensions exactly. The buyer, a Portuguese industrialist whose granddaughter recently donated his collection to a small provincial museum. Conservators examining the piece found faint tool marks beneath its base, scratches that, when magnified, resolve into the same broken key symbol from the Vander Meulens ledgers. The second lead is even more provocative. In 2008, a Parisian art dealer refused to authenticate a similar object for a private client, citing irregularities in the gem settings. The client's name never became public, but the dealer's notes describe a nervous man with a Brussels accent who kept glancing at the door. What makes this hunt so compelling isn't just the monetary value, though experts estimate the reliquary could fetch over 20 million at auction. It's the sheer audacity of the object's existence. This wasn't just loot or bribery. It was a cardinal's sacred trust traded like a poker chip in a game of empires. And whether it's gathering dust in a billionaire's vault or waiting to be recognized in some sleepy museum storage room, one thing is certain. The moment it resurfaces, the world will finally understand how deep the shadows of history truly run. Rebuilding the staircase became more than just a construction project. It turned into a conversation between past and present. The restoration team didn't simply replace the rotted wood and crumbling mortar. They took painstaking care to recreate the hidden compartment, this time lining it with tempered glass so visitors could peer inside. And there, nestled beneath the new steps, lay perfect replicas of the Vander Meulens documents, their aged parchment and faded ink reproduced down to the last stain and crease. It was a deliberate choice, a way to honor the house's tangled legacy rather than bury it again. Tour guides now pause at this very spot, their voices dropping as they recount how a routine repair unspooled centuries of deception. Visitors lean closer, their footsteps echoing where whispers of conspiracy once swirled. Some brush their fingers along the glass, as if hoping to absorb some fragment of the past. The mansion's caretakers joke that the staircase has become its most popular feature, more photographed than the grand ballroom or the antique chandeliers. There's something irresistible about standing where history cracked open, quite literally, under the weight of time. What's remarkable isn't just the physical reconstruction, but how the collapse reshaped the house's identity. Before, it was just another stately home on the tour route, notable mostly for its gabled roof and well-preserved tapestries. Now, it's a living lesson in how history hides in plain sight. The original builders never imagined their secret would become a spotlight. The Vander Meulens, who went to such lengths to conceal their schemes, would surely recoil at the thought of tourists snapping selfies above their incriminating ledgers. But perhaps that's the final irony. The staircase was meant to be forgettable, a functional element, not a focal point. Its collapse, which the family would have seen as a disaster, became the very thing that saved their story from oblivion. Every creak of the new steps, every gasp as guests glimpse the replicated documents, is a reminder that history doesn't belong to those who try to control it. It belongs to the curious, the accidental discoverers, and the ones willing to look beneath the surface. The house's defining story isn't about wealth or power. It's about how easily secrets, no matter how carefully buried, can rise again not as threats but as treasures. The Vander Meulens built an empire on secrets, but their downfall holds a warning that echoes across centuries. Trust is currency, and it devalues faster than gold. Their ledgers reveal a pattern modern leaders would recognize instantly: short-term gains bought with long-term vulnerabilities. Every blackmailed official was a potential whistleblower. Every coded message was a future smoking gun. They mastered the art of leverage but forgot one immutable law of human nature: silence has an expiration date. Compare their tactics to today's digital age, where encrypted chats replace ciphered letters and offshore accounts stand in for buried treasure. The tools have evolved, but the playbook remains startlingly similar. Disinformation campaigns. The Vander Meulens spread rumors of Spanish troop movements to manipulate commodity prices. Insider trading. Their agents bought up grain futures before orchestrating shortages. Even their use of third-party cutouts, merchants, priests, minor nobles mirrors modern proxy networks. The parallels aren't just historical curiosities, they're proof that power always seeks the same shadows. Yet the crucial difference lies in permanence. A 17th century ledger hidden behind a wall could survive for centuries, but a modern email leaves trails across servers, backups, and whistleblower hard drives. The Vander Meulens' greatest miscalculation was assuming their secrets would stay buried. Today's leaders face an even harsher reality. In an era of cloud storage and blockchain verification, nothing ever truly disappears. That broken staircase didn't just collapse, it became a time-release capsule of truth. The lesson isn't just about the dangers of deception, it's about the fragility of systems built on lies. Every bribe the Vander Meulens paid created a weak link. Every coerced ally became a liability. Their network thrived until the moment it didn't, and when it failed catastrophically. Modern organizations, from corporations to governments, often make the same gamble, prioritizing control over transparency. But history's clearest warning is this: empires topple when their foundations rot from within. The Vander Meulens didn't just leave behind a trove of documents, they left a blueprint for self-destruction. Perhaps the most sobering insight comes from the ledger's final pages. In the years before their collapse, the family's expenses shifted dramatically. Payments to spies dwindled, while costs for security consultations and fireproof vaults skyrocketed. They weren't just hiding from outsiders anymore, they were hiding from each other. Paranoia had replaced strategy. That's the inevitable endgame of a life built on secrets. You stop fearing your enemies and start fearing the people who know too much. In the end, the Vander Meulens weren't undone by a rival or a revolution. They were undone by the weight of their own shadows. The question of whether to reveal these explosive documents cuts deeper than academic debate. It forces us to confront who gets to decide when history speaks and when it stays silent. On one side stands Dr. Henry Moore, a third-generation archivist whose grandfather helped hide resistance fighters in these very tunnels during World War II. Every secret we expose, he insists, is a weapon we take from tyrants and manipulators. The Vander Meulen papers prove that when lies fester in darkness, they poison generations. His argument resonates in an era where misinformation spreads like wildfire. Sunlight, he believes, remains the best disinfectant against the rot of deception. Yet across the symposium hall, Professor Elena Vasquez adjusts her glasses with a sigh. A specialist in post-conflict reconciliation, she's spent years documenting how unearthing old wounds can reignite communal violence. Not every truth heals, she counters, tapping a finger on a ledger entry listing bribes paid to a judge whose descendants now sit on Belgium's Supreme Court. Do we really want to destabilize institutions over 300-year-old sins? Or are we just satisfying our own curiosity at the expense of living people? Her caution isn't hypothetical. In 2017, the leak of colonial-era land deeds in South Africa sparked violent disputes over property rights that had been dormant for a century. The dilemma crystallizes in a single document. the confession of a nun who allegedly poisoned a rival family's heir under orders from Margaretha Vander Meulen. Forensic analysis confirms the ink and paper are period appropriate, and the convent's records show a Sister Marie Claire vanishing that same year. But the convent still operates today, its quiet gardens a sanctuary for refugees. Publishing this could tarnish an institution that's done immeasurable good, all to condemn someone long dead. History isn't a courtroom, argues Vasquez. We're not here to deliver verdicts. Maul fires back with equal conviction. Then what's the alternative? A museum of half-truths where we whitewash the past to comfort the present. He points to Germany's approach to Nazi archives, painful but purposeful transparency that became foundational for rebuilding trust. Yet even that model has cracks. When the Stasi files were opened after reunification, some descendants learned their parents had been informants, fracturing families anew. There's no perfect solution, only trade-offs between justice and harmony, knowledge and peace. Perhaps the answer lies not in blanket disclosure, but in how we frame these revelations. The Bruges Historical Society recently pioneered a compromise, digitizing the full archive with tiered access. Scholars must apply to view unredacted materials, while public exhibits focus on broader themes rather than naming names. It's an imperfect system. Critics call it censorship by bureaucracy, but it acknowledges that history isn't just about facts. It's about the weight we ask living shoulders to bear for long-dead sins. The staircase's collapse didn't just reveal documents, it exposed the fault lines in how we grapple with uncomfortable legacies. Every society faces this choice eventually, to shine light on its shadows and risk the glare, or to let the darkness linger and wonder what might still be hiding there. Descendants of the Vander Meulen family still walk the streets of Bruges today, their last names sometimes altered by marriage or migration, but their bloodline tracing back to those shadowy merchants who once pulled Europe's strings. Modern DNA testing has confirmed what dusty archives suggested. These living heirs carry the legacy of their notorious ancestors in their very cells, yet their reactions to this inheritance couldn't be more divided. Take Sophie Vandenberg, a soft-spoken librarian who discovered her connection through a genealogy project. Holding a replica of her ancestors' cipher ledger, she marveled at its intricate symbols. It's like finding out your great-grandfather was a spy. She laughed to her. The family's past isn't a stain, it's a fascinating puzzle. She's even incorporated their story into local walking tours, pointing out the hidden compartments in old merchant houses with a mix of pride and theatrical flair. Then there's the de Klerk branch, who reacted with outright hostility when researchers reached out. One elderly patriarch reportedly burned a trunk of family papers upon learning of the connection, his hands shaking not from age but fury. "We built our name on honesty," his grandson later explained. "Those people were criminals. We won't have their shadows hanging over us." Their rejection was so absolute that they hired lawyers to contest the DNA findings, as if science itself could be subpoenaed into silence. The tension between these perspectives reveals something deeper than family drama. It's a microcosm of how societies grapple with uncomfortable histories. Some descendants wear their rogue heritage like a badge of intrigue, hosting dinner parties where they jokingly toast their pirate ancestors. Others refuse to acknowledge the link entirely, scrubbing Vander Meulen heirlooms from their homes. A few, like historian Matthias Duwinter, take a middle path. "We can't change where we come from," he notes, "but we can decide what we do with that knowledge." His latest book explores how the family's tactics mirror modern corporate espionage, turning ancient misdeeds into cautionary tales. Perhaps the most poignant moment came when two descendants, one from each camp, met unexpectedly at the restored mansion. The woman who'd embraced her lineage was examining the glass-encased ledger replica. The man who denied it stood stiffly by the exit. They exchanged no words, but their shared glance spoke volumes. Centuries may pass, ink may fade, but blood holds memory in ways we're still learning to understand. The staircase collapsed, the documents surfaced, and now these living threads of history must decide. Do they carry the past as a burden, a curiosity, or something in between? The discovery in Bruges sent ripples through European capitals, not with grand announcements, but with the quiet rustle of archivists pulling centuries-old files from locked cabinets. In Lisbon, a researcher poring over monastic records found letters between a local shipping dynasty and a French cardinal, their phrasing eerily similar to the Vander Meulens ciphers. Madrid's naval archives yielded ledgers where payments to Dutch merchants were marked with tiny compass symbols, the same code used in Antwerp. Like a stone tossed into still water, each revelation expanded the circle of suspicion, proving these weren't isolated schemes but threads in a vast, invisible tapestry of influence. What unsettled historians most wasn't just the scale of the network, but how seamlessly it had blended into the fabric of daily life. These merchant families weren't lurking in alleyways. They hosted banquets, funded cathedrals, and sat on city councils. Their ships flew respectable flags while carrying contraband intelligence in hollowed-out masts. A Venetian diplomat's memoir from 1653 describes attending a gala where three supposedly rival traders from Bruges, Genoa, and Hamburg exchanged subtle nods across the room. At the time, it read as polite society. Now it looks like a board meeting. The real turning point came when a Berlin archivist noticed peculiar patterns in Prussian tax records. Certain trading houses consistently underreported cargo values by the exact percentage, needed to avoid triggering audits, a statistical impossibility without collusion. Cross-referencing those names with French intelligence logs revealed something chilling. Over half appeared as paid informants. This wasn't just economic manipulation. It was systemic espionage disguised as commerce, with roots stretching from Baltic grain exchanges to Mediterranean spice routes. Yet for all these connections, one question lingers: why now? The Bruges staircase collapsed at a moment when technology finally allowed these scattered clues to be pieced together. Handwriting analysis software matched scribbled marginalia in Lisbon to Antwerp. Carbon dating confirmed documents from disparate archives were penned with ink from the same batch. Even the pollen found in hidden compartments, once dismissed as meaningless debris, now traces trade routes like forensic evidence. The past didn't change. Our ability to see its hidden patterns did. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson of this entire saga. History isn't just written by the victors. It's laundered by the discreet, its sharpest edges smoothed over until something shakes the foundation. That staircase didn't just collapse, it cracked open an entire era, revealing how much we still don't know about the quiet hands that shaped our world. And if one family's secrets could rewrite textbooks, imagine what still lies buried beneath other unassuming floorboards, waiting for the right moment to come to light. The novelist who first fictionalized the Vander Meulens saga insisted his work was pure imagination until historians uncovered the real letters. Side by side, the parallels were uncanny. His scene of a midnight meeting in a rain-lashed Antwerp tavern. The family's own correspondence described nearly identical encounters, right down to the coded knock used to gain entry. 3 quick raps, a pause, then 2 more. His villain's signature move, poisoning a rival's wine with a tincture disguised as a rosary bead. Archivists found an apothecary's receipt in the hidden compartment for glass vials of pearlescent finish, suitable for devotional purposes. Even the novel's ominous tagline, "Beware the third step," turned out to be verbatim from a warning scrawled in the margin of a 1645 ledger. But where fiction faltered was in underestimating the family's cunning. The novelist had imagined the third step as metaphorical, some grand betrayal waiting in the final act. Reality was far more literal. Conservators examining the original staircase found its third tread rigged with a pressure-sensitive mechanism. Step there with the right sequence of movements, and the compartment would open smoothly. Misstep and the entire structure would collapse, taking any intruder with it. This wasn't just security, it was psychological warfare designed to make even authorized users nervous. The Vander Meulens understood that the best way to keep a secret wasn't just to hide it, but to make people afraid to look. The letters themselves read like a masterclass in tension. One dispatch describes a meeting abruptly moved to a riverside warehouse after the usual venue, reeked of Spanish leather, a detail that seemed innocuous until researchers realized Spanish officers wore distinctively tanned boots. Another recounts a courier's unfortunate digestion after sampling a gift of spiced wine. The writer's tone so casually menacing it chills the blood centuries later. Modern crime writers might craft elaborate dialogue, but the real documents achieve more with less. A single line, "The door-direct matter is concluded, though the snows there run red," says enough to haunt without spelling out the violence. What fascinates isn't just the drama, but the duality. These were men who penned tender letters to their children about scripture and music in the morning, then coolly plotted assassinations by afternoon. The same inkwell that recorded a daughter's first steps also tallied bribes to a judge. Perhaps that's why their story captivates, not because they were monsters, but because they were human. They loved, they feared, they prayed, and then they broke every moral code to protect what they'd built. The novelist got the plot twists right, but he missed the tragedy. The real Vander Meulen legacy isn't in the schemes or the ciphers. It's in the quiet moments when they chose power over conscience and left those choices buried until a staircase gave way and the past refused to stay silent. The journey of these centuries-old documents reads like a thriller penned by history itself. While some letters and ledgers now rest safely behind climate-controlled glass in museums, their delicate pages illuminated for public study, others have slipped into the shadows of private collections. One particularly damning letter, a confession written in Margaretha Vander Meulen's own hand, vanished from a Berlin auction house in 2012, only to resurface 2 years later in the penthouse of a Singapore-based shipping magnate. When pressed by journalists, the billionaire shrugged off the controversy, calling his acquisition a masterpiece of deception and the Renaissance equivalent of a corporate takeover. His nonchalance underscores a sobering truth. For some, these artifacts aren't historical records, they're trophies, proof that the games of power and secrecy never really ended. Meanwhile, in university libraries from Bruges to Boston, archivists work against time. Their scanners hum late into the night, capturing every stain and crease of the remaining documents before age turns them to dust, or worse, before they're plucked from circulation by collectors who'd rather hide history than share it. The digitization effort has become a kind of quiet rebellion, with librarians using blockchain technology to create tamper-proof records of each artifact's contents. One curator described it as building a bomb shelter for truth, ensuring that even if the physical papers disappear, their secrets won't. The stakes became painfully clear in 2019, when a fire broke out in a Swiss warehouse storing several Vander Meulen ledgers on loan. Firefighters arrived to find the sprinklers mysteriously disabled, and by morning, only charred fragments remained. Investigators noted the blaze had burned unusually hot, the hallmark of accelerants, and that the only other items destroyed were the documents. Coincidence, the insurance assessor thought not. Yet for all the intrigue surrounding their whereabouts, the scattered artifacts continue to speak across the centuries. A librarian in Ghent recently discovered marginalia in a digitized ledger that no one had noticed before. Tiny sketches of ships with rigging so precise they matched surviving blueprints of the family's fleet. Another researcher, cross-referencing auction catalogs, realized a fake letter dismissed in the 1930s was actually authentic. Its bizarre phrasing wasn't poor penmanship, but a cipher revealing coordinates to a long-lost strongbox. The irony is impossible to ignore. The Vander Meulens went to extraordinary lengths to control their legacy, hiding truths behind walls and beneath floorboards. Now, those same truths are slipping through fingers again, not because they're buried, but because they're too valuable to leave undisturbed. Whether locked in vaults or floating in the cloud, these documents carry whispers of a past that refuses to be silenced, no matter who tries to claim it. Theories exploded across the internet like fireworks in a library, some dazzling, some downright combustible. Within hours of the staircase discovery going public, forums lit up with claims that the Vander Meulens weren't just merchants but Templar descendants safeguarding holy relics. Others insisted their cipher matched alien contact symbols from fringe archaeological theories. One viral post superimposed the family's compass symbol over a crop circle, declaring it proof of extraterrestrial economic guidance. Skeptics dismissed it as fantasy, but beneath the absurdity lurked a kernel of uncomfortable truth. When official histories crumble, people rush to fill the gaps with whatever makes the new void feel less unnerving. What's fascinating isn't the conspiracy theories themselves, but why they gain traction. The Vander Meulen documents didn't just reveal hidden transactions, they exposed how fragile our trust in historical narratives really is. If generations of textbooks could gloss over an entire shadow economy operating beneath Europe's mercantile facade, what else might they have smoothed out or erased? This isn't about aliens or secret societies. It's about the unsettling realization that history isn't a static record. It's a battleground where winners don't just write the stories, they burn the rough drafts. Take the recurring Templar banker theory. Sure, the Vander Meulen's financial networks were eerily sophisticated for their time, and yes, their symbols shared vague geometric similarities with medieval Masonic sketches. But the real connection is more profound and more human. Like the Templars, they understood that money isn't just currency, it's influence. Where the knights used their wealth to build churches, the merchants used theirs to buy silence. The difference: the Templars got caught, the Vander Meulens nearly didn't. Then there's the quieter, more plausible conspiracy that historians actually debate. Were these documents planted? The compartment's construction was too meticulous, the preservation too perfect. Some scholars argue the family wanted this story found eventually, not as confession but as insurance. If their descendants ever faced persecution, these papers could be traded for clemency, exposing powerful families across Europe in one devastating domino effect. It's a theory that turns the staircase collapse from accident into delayed detonation, a centuries-old contingency plan finally triggered by rotting wood. The wildest speculation, though, came from an unexpected source, a retired engineer who noticed the mansion's blueprints contained precise mathematical ratios found in Renaissance occult texts. His YouTube video dissecting the sacred geometry of deception went viral even as academics scoffed, but his central metaphor stuck. The Vander Meulens didn't just build a house. They built a labyrinth, and every generation since has been stumbling through it, mistaking shadows for walls. Maybe that's the real conspiracy, not that history hides truths, but that we've been trained to stop questioning the walls around us. In the end, the document's greatest revelation isn't about the past, it's about us. The moment we're confronted with proof that history can be fabricated, we start seeing patterns everywhere, some real, some imagined. The Vander Meulens story terrifies not because it's extraordinary, but because it suggests the ordinary is often anything but. Their ledgers force a question we'd rather avoid. If this much could hide behind one staircase, what might still be waiting behind the next? The most baffling mystery isn't what the Vander Meulens did, it's why they left proof. These weren't careless criminals, they were meticulous strategists who spent decades covering their tracks. So why stash incriminating ledgers where someone might find them? One prevailing theory suggests it was the ultimate insurance policy. In a world where alliances shifted like sand, holding tangible proof of a rival's crimes could be more valuable than armed guards. Imagine being a magistrate who'd taken bribes, only to learn the Vander Meulens had your signed receipts tucked behind their stairs. Suddenly, turning against them became unthinkable. But arrogance can't be ruled out. Perhaps after years of outmaneuvering kings and cardinals, they grew overconfident, treating their secrets like trophies. There's a chilling entry in one ledger where Margaretha Vander Meulen boasts about a rival's downfall, adding, "Let this record stand that none may forget who holds the reins." This wasn't just documentation, it was gloating, a victor's impulse to immortalize their cunning. Power corrupts, but absolute power that breeds the delusion of invincibility. The bigger question lingers like dust in hidden compartments. How many other families did the same? In Venice, restorers recently found hollow bricks in a merchant's palazzo containing smuggled Byzantine artifacts. A Stockholm mansion yielded love letters between a queen and her treasurer, sewn into the hem of a tapestry. These aren't isolated incidents, they're patterns. For every Vander Meulen staircase, there might be a dozen more waiting to collapse under a Parisian townhouse, a Lisbon counting room, or even a New York brownstone built with old-world wealth. What's startling is how little it takes to rewrite history. A loose floorboard, a cracked plaster wall, the right set of eyes noticing an anomaly in the grain of wood. The search for these hidden truths has become its own discipline, with archaeologists now wielding thermal scanners and AI-enhanced document analysis alongside traditional picks and brushes. Every scan of an antique desk, every X-ray of a family portrait could reveal compartments within compartments, layers of deception waiting centuries for light. The Vander Meulen papers didn't just expose one family's secrets, they cracked open a mindset. When you realize how many people in power have buried their misdeeds, history stops feeling like a record and starts feeling like a puzzle with half the pieces still missing. And somewhere out there, beneath the weight of time and timber, those pieces are waiting. All it takes is one creaking step. The collapsed staircase did more than reveal hidden papers. It shattered illusions about where real power lurks in history's corridors. We're taught to look for grand battles and crowned rulers, but the Vander Meulen documents whisper a different truth. Influence moves like smoke, seeping through cracks in official records. Their ledgers prove that while kings claimed thrones, merchants like these were quietly buying the timber beneath them. Poisoned wine, rigged markets, blackmailed officials. These weren't the tools of outliers. They were the hidden gears turning empires. What's haunting isn't just their ruthlessness, but how ordinary it all seemed to them. Balancing the household accounts on one page, tallying bribes on the next. That duality forces us to confront an uncomfortable idea. Maybe the Vander Meulens weren't monsters. Maybe they were simply the best at a game everyone played. After all, their network included bishops, magistrates, even artists people history remembers as paragons of their age. The staircase's collapse didn't just expose a family's crimes. It revealed how complicity weaves itself into the fabric of an era. Yet there's hope in the way these secrets resurfaced. However carefully they were buried, time undid every precaution. The mortar mixed to crumble on command. It crumbled too soon. The ink formulated to last centuries. It became their indictment. That's the delicious irony. Their obsession with controlling the future is precisely what doomed them. In trying to preserve their legacy, they guaranteed its infamy. So the next time you walk through an old house or run your hand along a weathered banister, pause. Consider how many hands shaped that wood before yours and what those hands might have concealed. History isn't done speaking. It's just waiting for the right moment, for a floorboard to creak, a wall to crack, for someone like you to ask, what's hidden here? The past never really stays buried. It lingers in the quiet spaces, patient as dust, until the world is ready to listen. Now we turn to you. Have you ever stumbled upon a fragment of forgotten history? A strange marking in an antique book, a long sealed compartment in an old desk. Share your discoveries below, because every mystery starts with someone noticing something out of place. And if you crave more journeys into the shadows of history, hit that subscribe button. Who knows, the next great revelation might be waiting beneath your feet.